Welcome to the Strange Brew podcast. My name's Jason Barnard, and we've got Rob Caiger here from Nice Records. All the releases on Nice Records are absolutely perfect for the Strange Brew, and we're going to talk about some of them today. Rob is archivist, reissue producer, and much more at Nice Records. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure to be on.
For those that aren't familiar with you, just tell us a bit about yourself and your role at Nice Records.
Well, the easiest way to explain what I do at Nice Records is I work directly with Kenny Jones and Nigel Adams, who really spearhead Nice Records. Obviously, everybody knows Kenny. His business manager is Nigel. And over a period of a few years, they've seen the gap in the market with physical products, with reissues, and with things that have never come out before, that many artists, certainly from Kenny's generation, are sitting on in their own personal archives. In many cases, the record labels don't have this material. My background has been as an archivist, as a producer, artist liaison, label manager. What we did is we combined all our skills, primarily through working over many, many years with Kenny on the small faces, with the faces. And I would go round to his house and he'd have a big barn where he kept all his flight cases. And I would open up the flight cases because he remembered that he'd have a few tapes knocking about. And of course, out fell tons and tons of tapes. Kenny was on many sessions for other artists, especially at Olympic Studios, which is where I am now. And he would always insist on a copy of the tape just to check. Drummers seem to be sort of their own archivists. And in many cases, Kenny's got the only surviving copy of that copy tape of the master, which is how we were able to rebuild the Small Faces catalogue. Might be jumping ahead a little bit, but that's primarily what I do, is I work directly with the artist, with their archives, and with the record companies. And between all of us, we can put together box sets or the correct version of an LP that's been out, but in the wrong order or the wrong mastering, or it's not as good as it should be. There's a few skills that get pulled together, but it's primarily talking to people so we can make the best possible artifact. Because let's face it, how long are we going to have physical products? That's the very reason why Nice Records exists. The major labels would rather we all stream stuff.
Yeah, we do seem to be at a moment in time when, even with the Beatles to a certain extent, certainly in terms of the film side, is that there isn't really a focus on Blu-ray, for example. But then when you go to music more broadly, a lot of people love vinyl records. There's definitely a market there, but actually it's just much easier to just put it on Spotify.
It is, and then you get into the whole realm of what's the version on Spotify? How is it mastered? Because each format, I mean, streaming is a wonderful promotional tool for the physical product. I mean, I can't remember what the statistic is. It's something like 47 to 55% of people that buy vinyl don't have a turntable. They will want to own the artifact, put it on a lovely collection on their shelves, and they will stream it through Spotify for convenience. And it's one of the reasons why Spotify are now offering a new premium service at much higher quality. But there is, thanks to Record Store Day, we do have an appreciation at all ages for vinyl and also for CD. The box set is the perfect example of how CDs can be used, because with few exceptions, who wants a 12 LP box set? I've just had to carry something now from the record company, the new David Bowie box set. God, that's my workout for the day. There comes a point where we haven't got any room. So, the major labels do want everything streaming. And obviously they'll put out your Pink Floyds, your Queens, and your Steely Dans, and so on and so forth. And where does that leave groups like the Small Faces? That's why Nice Records existed. If they're not going to release the Small Faces as physical products, then what chance is there for other artists?
But at the same time, for many people like myself, material on Immediate, The Small Faces, Humble Pie, and much more is of a similar rank to your Beatles, your Queens, your Pink Floyds, and they absolutely deserve to be treated with the reverence, respect, care, and attention that those other artists are done.
That's correct. I think if you're going to do something in this day and age, because let's face it, I'm a fan just as much as anybody else. I bought the albums when they first come out. Maybe I bought them on CD. I think I did. We bought them again on CD. Then we bought them on remastered CD. Then we bought them as a deluxe box set. However you like to dress it up, there's been multiple versions. So what are we doing? How are we adding to that? And to me, the first port of call that we have to address is if the artist is still with us, they have to be involved. And that's when you look, like with the Humble Pie album, you learn As Safe as Yesterday Is that we've just done. You learn that it wasn't the track listing that the guys wanted. At the time, Immediate insisted on taking Natural Born Boogie off to make it as a single, and you didn't have the single on the album. So they messed with we've restored that. We've put it as it should have been, and on the CD, it's expanded with all the bonus material, so everything's there. It's all correctly mastered. As far as I'm concerned, that's the definitive version of that album because the guys, Peter and Jerry, have signed off on it. The sleeve notes have got a load of information there that no one knows about. We go into detail on the tracks, but it is the definitive version. And we're going to be doing a box set next year for Humble Pie's career on Immediate Records. Lots of unreleased material. And that will be the definitive box set. Each thing we do has to be definitive because I'm conscious that people don't have the space. They've certainly bought a lot of this material the first time round. Immediate's a bit different because when it went into liquidation, there were lots of cheap reissues, but many of the albums and certainly the singles were never reissued again. They'd turn up vinyl dubs on CD compilations. So we're conscious now. We've got lots of sessions that were never released. There's a whole ton of material that has never come out on Immediate. And that's one of the things that we intend to get round to doing.
Yeah, because you've mentioned As Safe as Yesterday Is, and we can get into the circumstances of that debut album by Humble Pie, but even some of the early vinyl versions of that album weren't as good as they should be, let alone the further reissues along the way. So this is the first chance with this reissue on Nice Records to be able to hear the album as it was truly meant to be.
What we do is when we master, obviously the guys hear it. And I had Jerry Shirley straight away on the phone. He said, I can't believe it. I can hear my drums. I can hear my cymbals. What happened with that particular album, they had spent a lot, it's a long album. I think one of the sides is 25 minutes. They spent a lot of time getting that master tape perfect. I mean, the album itself is way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
The blend of rock and folk, acoustic, progressive rock, it's all in there, way ahead of Zeppelin. And brilliantly played, and 3 great vocalists. Everything on that album is superb. And the master tape that Andy Johns prepared, I think it was done at Olympic. They were using 2 studios, Olympic Studios and Morgan Studios. But they prepared a master tape and it was going to be cut to lacquers from which they pressed the vinyl from in New York. I think Bob Ludwig was going to do it. Midway between London and New York, that master tape went missing. It's never been found. And so Peter Frampton got a panic phone call from Andrew Oldham saying, I can't find the tape. Have you got a tape? And I said, no, there's one master tape. We didn't do any, we've got to do other master, there's no time. What they did have were listening copy tapes, which about, they'd be like 7-inch, that sort of size. So your master tape runs at a speed of 15 revolutions, and the listening tape is 7. So it's a lot less. And the listening tape had been listened to multiple times, but that's all they had. So that was sent out, and they mastered from that, which is why the album sounds dull. It sounds muffled. There's no dynamic range on it. That's all they had. Immediate as a company was going through problems. That was the tail end of Immediate, 1969. There was major financial problems because of problems with their American distributors. The cash flow wasn't there. Andrew Oldham was bankrolling the company himself personally. He totally believed in humble pie. He was a massive champion for them. And he basically financed humble pie. That was the last throw of the dice. You know, he discovered another great group. He discovered, or was early days with the Rolling Stones, certainly got them their first success. He moved the Small Faces on, and his third discovery was humble pie. But the album, when it came out, when they played it, it was like not the album they'd recorded. So over the years, you know, they did do other master tapes, but it was too late. It was too late then. Immediate was liquidated soon after. So all tapes got disposed of, they got lost, they got stolen, all sorts. But we managed to track down, it took me a long time, but I did find a safety copy, a safety master. And it's like night and day. You know, all the fans, you know, super critical fans as they should be, because we're asking them to buy something again. And it's been released on CD over many years. It's been released, I think, a few times on vinyl. But they're all dubs from the original LP disc. No one's done it from the actual tape. This is the first time from the tape. It's mastered to vinyl. It was mastered to be cut to lacquers at Air Studios, which it was. It was then mastered to the CD format with the additional tracks for the bonus material. And we've mastered it for streaming. So mastered to all the various formats. And that comes back to your point, is record companies put stuff up on streaming. Mostly it's not mastered to that format. So it's quite a nice listening experience.
It's an important album, you know, in that period, 68 into 69. The splitting of the Small Faces into two of the greatest bands of the 1970s, whether it's the Faces or Humble Pie. And that album in particular, As Safe as Yesterday Is, you mentioned about the styles of music that it was kind of emerging from it, but certainly heavy metal is something that comes out very strongly with that album.
It does. You would go from heavy rock, heavy metal. I mean, the sleeve notes that we do there, Jerry says, whatever thing that people wanted us to play, we could play. Obviously, they pursued their own music and what was influencing them, but there's a lot of stuff on there that people hadn't heard before. You're listening to very intricate folk guitar, very English. People have said about Humble Pie about a country music influence. I hear a bit of it more on the second album, but certainly on this album, it's pastoral English folk music, but done really well. And then, you know, they're not afraid to be exposed musically. You'll listen to the guitar, you'll listen to the piano. There's intricate percussion going on there. We bring all that out now, you can hear it. You've got wonderful three-part harmonies, but you've got three really, really good singers in their own style. It's amazing. It's like when you restore an old painting and you wipe all the dirt off. You know, it surprised me. My job is to make sure the artist is happy. But when I get the fans coming back, we're talking long-term fans. We're talking fans who have never heard this album. Yeah. Certainly in America, certainly in parts of Europe, they're coming back and saying, this is incredible. Where's this album been? Why didn't we know about it? So it was only on sale for a short period of time. I think it was August 69 it was released, and Immediate were liquidated March 1970. And things weren't being pressed, things weren't being distributed. So if you had it, people have still got scratchy copies. But again, the sound of the original wasn't as good as it should have been. And that's what most of the reissues were taken from. Old LPs cleaned up.
Town and Country, the second Humble Pie album, it's kind of almost been lost. The circumstances of Immediate going under kind of almost disappeared the record. Now remastered, you know, what you've done to it again enables people to hear it truly for the first time. But for me, that pastoral acoustic side really does come out, but it's also very much a band effort, kick-starting with a Peter Frampton track, Take Me Back. He's maturing. You've got Greg Ridley, The Light of Love. You've got still that Indian influence coming in.
Yeah.
And then when Steve sings more broadly, one of, or probably the greatest vocalist, that's the makings again of a very special album.
It is. It was. I'd often wondered why it came out in the UK. It was never released in America. In the UK, it came out, I think it was about 3 months after the debut. And there was a couple of reasons for that. They'd amassed a whole load of material. They'd recorded a lot of material. They'd rehearsed, they'd written. It was during a period, they were formed on New Year's Day, 1969, after Steve walked out of the gig, Alexandra Palace with the Small Faces. And there were certain contractual issues that had to be cleared up before they could announce Humble Pie. But they were all together. So during that time, Andrew had signed them, and he had to sort out all the contractual issues. So during that time, they locked themselves away in a little village hall in the Essex countryside, in the village of Magdalen Laver. And they just recorded, they rehearsed, they wrote. They did about 3 albums worth of material. Now, obviously, As Safe as Yesterday has come out, and they carried on with the tracks that were going to go. But a lot of the material was all done together. And the difference between the 2 albums is As Safe as Yesterday is very multi-layered. It's everything but the kitchen sink on there. It's brilliant. All the progressive rock stuff, as well as the hard rock stuff, as you say, the heavy metal stuff, and the folk. When they get to Town and Country, there's still elements of that. But as you say, there's more input from each individual member. That first side is made up of tracks by each member. They wrote their own songs. But it's more stripped back. You know, this was a band that was quite brave to just have Peter playing guitar and singing. And then you would have the piano. It's really, really clever what they do on that album. It reveals them a lot more. It's a lot more personal. But you're right, you definitely get that feeling, not of American country music, but you get that feeling of English folk music. There were some promotional photos done of them standing in a field that had just been ploughed. That's the vibe. It's very much the Essex countryside. During the summer, when most of this was recorded, that shines through. And yeah, it's an album that I think the first album is more instant. The second album certainly repays repeated listening. There's some very good, there's a lot of good material, and they're long albums again. You know, and with the bonus materials, there's tons of stuff in the archive that we're going to put on the box set. But with the bonus tracks on here, you're up to about 70 minutes on each. It's just incredible what they did. But of course, the problem, Town and Country come out in the UK 3 months after the debut album. But the band were out touring in the States, and Immediate had set up as an independent because they were going nowhere with the distributors that they had out there. So they set up as an independent. It was Andrew out there, Paul Baines, the manager of the American outfit for Immediate. And they were very successful as an independent company, but they were up against corporates that really squashed them. But for a period of a couple of months, Humble Pie in America were building up an audience. As Safe as Yesterday has come out, but they could only sustain it for so long. And Andrew could only sustain it for so long with his money. And that's the reason why Town and Country never had a chance in America. It never got released. Humble Pie had to come back. And soon after, Immediate were liquidated. So Town and Country, people don't really know it. Certainly not the way it sounds now.
Where was the Autumn Stone, the Small Faces, the collection, post-split collection? There's a lot of stuff going out in this paper. So when was that record released?
The Autumn Stone was, it was Autumn Stone. You're looking, it was going to, well, there was going to be an album called The Autumn Stone, the new Small Faces album that they were working on. The problem that they had after Ogden's was how did they follow up this multi-layered the incredible concept album, which was quite rightly #1 for 6 weeks. And after that, how did they follow that album up? And they were going in the direction that Humble Pie were, the mix of rock and folk, English folk. And once they were going to do an album called 1862. It was more like a concept where they were going to strip everything back and just make everything simple after the studio complexities of Ogden's. And which ultimately, that's the direction Steve went with Humble Pie. But yeah, with Autumn Stone, it was meant to be an album of this stripped back material, of which the Autumn Stone, the track itself, was going to be the lead track. Once they came up with that, they changed from 1862 to the Autumn Stone. And then at the other end of the spectrum was their heavy rock track, Wham Bam Thank You Ma'am. That was similar to what Humble Pie did. You've got the whole gamut of musical styles there. So that was around 68, 69. But because they had cash flow problems, they thought, right, what can we do? We're going to do a series of 2 LP albums, compilation albums with our best artists. Small Faces had gone to #1 for 6 weeks. Their singles always went in the charts. Let's start with a collection. They've split up now. We haven't got them. So November time, releasing time for the Christmas market. Unfortunately, distribution problems because they couldn't pay their distributors, couldn't get the cash flow in. I think ultimately it sold about 14,000 copies.
Really?
Yeah, 14,000 at the time, which nowadays is great. I'd love to do that. But back then, that's disastrous, considering what Ogden's has sold. So, I think they did a double album for The Nice, their third album. There was a few others. They had their blues collections, which were really successful. They went in the charts, the Immediate Blues series. They repackaged those as double albums. So once things could get out there and people could buy them, the problem was at the time when Immediate was falling apart, people couldn't get hold of things. It was really a problem with distribution, pressing problems, things got delayed. I think ultimately it took about 3 months for the Autumn Stone to be fully distributed. So yeah, they couldn't get the money in. And of course there was problems in America, which should have been their biggest market. But if you're not being released because you've got a dispute with your distributor, and they had their dispute with the biggest record company at the time, which was CBS Records, if they're not releasing your products, then you've not got any cash flow. So it was also, for an independent, they achieved so much, but it was all stacked against them.
So what was the difference with the nice version of the Autumn Stone? Because I understand there was a hell of a lot of effort to correct certain issues with the original version of the album and again make it the best it could be.
Well, the original was way ahead of its time, actually. David Hepworth said something to me when he bought the Autumn Stone when it came out. He said no one would even be thinking about, is this the right version of the track? Is this slightly off center? Is this stereo? Is this mono? Yeah, and he's absolutely right. We put the thing on and we listened to it and then went out and saw the band if they were still doing stuff. A bit different nowadays, because if we do something and you play it back and you listen and you just think, oh, well, for starters, the Small Faces weren't involved with it. They'd split up. Kenny, Ronnie and Mac were working on the Faces. Steve was obviously doing what he was doing with Humble Pie. And they had no input into it. But the Autumn Stone itself, as a compilation at the time, a double LP compilation and a great sleeve, did something that no other compilations had done, that they involved 2 record companies. So they actually had Decca material on there and Immediate material. And this is at a time when record labels didn't cooperate. So the fact that they'd got this arrangement with Decca, I think through Andrew's Rolling Stones Association, meant they could get the Decca tracks. But there were a lot of technical issues with it, wrong versions. There were, at that point, some of the masters had been damaged. Things like Afterglow, you're listening to it in stereo. And then towards the end, it changes into mono because the tape was damaged. So they just spliced a piece of the mono master onto the end. Some of the mono tracks are off center. So we've corrected all of that. We've put the right versions back on there. The Decca tracks to make, the big thing about the Autumn Stone was it was promoted as being stereo when the Decca tracks were all mono. So they didn't have that. I don't even think the multi-tracks existed then. I think they've been taped over. So to make the tracks stereo, they put a load of phasing effects over the top of them. So, you know, you're listening and it's mono, but you've got all this stereo phasing going on. So they're not even the original single versions. So we have the original master, mono masters of the original singles on there. And Kenny got involved on behalf of the band. And I said, if we expand this, what would you want put on there? And he said, well, I want the right versions. I want them to sound the best that they possibly can. And I want the tracks that we enjoyed recording in the studio together, that we had a laugh on. So those are the tracks that are on there. Green Circle should have been on there on the original Autumn Stone. It's such a great psychedelic track, way ahead of its time. So loads going, and Kenny's he's playing on that. He's incredible. It's pure percussion. So yeah, so Kenny had an input, and we thought if we're going to do this properly, let's do it as a box set. And that's the joy in Nice Records. It's artist-led. It involves the artist, and I wouldn't have been able to do a 68-page book. I suddenly realised I'd written a lot of the stuff I knew that no one else knew. Because usually I'll get a writer, a recognised writer in to do the sleeve notes. But some of the stuff that went on in the background with the media, only I've had been sent all the original contracts and correspondence and all the stuff that went on in the background, all the disputes. I've been working on that with Kenny over many, many years. And that informed the sleeve notes, what was going on. Because people unfairly do blame Andrew Oldham. He set up this label, everyone loved it, all the artists loved it. You talk to the artists who were on immediate, they're sad at what happened, that it never continued. But they always say, without Andrew Oldham giving us a chance, believing in us, and two fingers up to the establishment as it was at the time, to put these records out and spend money on promotion and on the packaging, they wouldn't have had this chance. So the least we can do is present the correct story from the artist's mouth, from all the research that I've done and through talking to people. And we turn things up. Like, I never thought I'd turn up Mac's original sketches and drawings. So we'd finished the book, and Mac's son Lee said, oh, I've got all these drawings that Dad did. Kenny didn't even remember it. They didn't even remember Mac doing them. I thought, that's got to go in. So we represent the career of the Small Faces on Decca and on Immediate in that book that's with the Autumn Stone. And Gerard got involved, obviously their photographer, but he came up with the concept of the album design. Yeah, it's as good as it can be. Certainly with the mastering, the vinyl sound is incredible. Where we had that pressed, I've listened to a few things that have come back on vinyl, and sometimes they're not quite there. But what Package Sounds did for us, they look after all our production. The sound they got off of that was absolutely superb. And then we did the 3 CD, because I was conscious that everyone can't afford a signed deluxe box set, or even the box set that's not signed. So let's have a version out there that everyone can get with everything on it. And the 3rd CD replicates the Autumn Stone with all the strange stereo phasing. So you get the original as well. But the one thing we haven't compromised on, the live tracks are as they should have been, at the right speed and pitch. We're not putting those mistakes back on. Everyone seems happy. The CD is has sold so well. So there's still definitely a market for CDs in the reissue world.
Yeah, CD, excellent quality, certainly far superior to streaming.
Oh God, yeah. People don't. If you actually play things back to back, streaming is for convenience. For me, it actually is. It goes hand in hand with deluxe vinyl. Check it out on the streaming services. We have mastered to the streaming format, and it's going to sound as good as it can sound, compressed and everything else, because all the streaming services put their own compression on things so they can squeeze what they squeeze down the wires. But when you play it back to back with CD and then you play it back to back with vinyl, they're different experiences. So long as you can master, to each particular format and be mindful of the format that you're mastering to, you're going to have a great experience.
You were talking about the end of Immediate. What was it that did Immediate in the end? Was it the recording costs in terms of Andrew's projects and strings, or was it something else?
Something else. It started in 1967. Immediate primarily were releasing singles. You think about all the singles that they had, and most of the singles weren't hits. Obviously, Chris Farlow with Out of Time was a massive #1. The Small Faces joined the label in February 67. And they started straight off with a hit, Here Come the Nice, followed up with Hitchcock Park, which was recorded and released during the Summer of Love. I think it was the only song that was done during that, in the UK at least. So they were having the hits, but they were releasing more singles than they were having hits. They would put out albums, some of which were hits, but they weren't having global hits. And the problem that they had, very much a UK European label, and they had an offer to be distributed in America, biggest market in the world. And if they'd have sold in America, I think the label would still be going today. But there was a deal done in America which fell apart, and then that deal was replaced by another deal with another distributor, but they'd broken a contract. So they ended up owing the original distributor a lot of money, which had to be paid to them. It was so big, they had to pay it back over installments. Now, that's great. If you've got another distributor that's working your product, you're going to get that cash flow come through. But the other distributor started well. I think they had a hit with Hitchcock Park. So that was a big success in America. And then that distributor sort of got lukewarm on the material they were being given. I can't quite see it myself, because if you're being offered something like Humble Pie, that's, as was proven for the American market especially, they were massive. How you didn't see it, but a lot of the material that Andrew was presenting to CBS, as was the distributor then, the new distributor, they just weren't hearing it. There were things released, but they had to do it as an independent. So you've got the original fallout with their original distributor, which was United Artists. So you settle that legally, and you owe them a lot of money, which is paid back over installments from 1967 onwards. You've got a new distributor that should be distributing your albums that you've recorded, produced, ready to go. They're not even releasing them. You then set up as an independent, and this is all being financed by Andrew. So you've got three costs, major costs going on, when you should be having a big revenue stream coming in from your American distributor. You're not. That's not sustainable. I mean, it's to Andrew's credit that he almost succeeded as an independent in America. And they were getting a lot of airplay with Humble Pie. They were getting great reviews. But with that sort of outcome, where you're just not getting the things in the shops, it's a shame. So globally, Immediate didn't sell, and they didn't sell in America. And with all the costs that they had through those legal actions, you're going to run out of money. And at the end of it, people say that, well, people have unfairly said over the years that Andrew ripped everyone off. Well, at the end of it, the biggest creditor of Immediate Records was Andrew Oldham. He'd believed in that label. He'd believed in those artists. And people can say that, but he actually put his money up. So he lost the most money. He lost personally about over £2 million.
Gosh.
It's such a shame, because none of the artists I've spoke to regret their time on Immediate. They're sad it ended, because it was the label. It was the label to be signed to. Probably the English Motown. That was the plan. It was that well respected. It's such a shame. He ran up against the establishment, certainly in America, and ran out of money.
Given where you sat at Olympic Studios, can you summarize the significance of Olympic then and now?
Oh, Olympic then. What's that famous quote? Abbey Road had the Beatles, Olympic Studios had everyone else. And of course, they had the Beatles as well.
It did.
It was state of the art, not in the middle of when it moved, because Olympic was in London originally when it was set up by Keith Grant. It moved out to Barnes, which is a wonderful location. You have to make a bit of an effort to get to it, even though it is part of London. It was such a great room. Such a great room. I mean, obviously I was too young to be here in the 60s, but you talk to the artists that were here. And I know you talked to one of the engineers. It was just, that room was incredible. You had such a great skill set of engineers, starting with Keith Grant. They were making the equipment. They were making the recording modules and everything else. And then you've got this giant room, so you can get a fabulous drum sound. The famous Glyn Johns drum sound. Couple of mics, maybe 3 microphones, because you're recording the artist in their purest form. And that room, excuse me, that room just helps do that. I mean, you think of the engineers that went through Olympic from the 60s, who went on to become producers. I mean, they were producers at the time. Look at Eddie Kramer, Jules Chicans, Andy Johns, obviously Glyn Johns. Just a wonderful series of skilled people here. And the place itself, the vibe of it, brought all that creativity out. You weren't hassled. You weren't in the centre of London, not on Abbey Road where you've got the press outside wanting to catch the Beatles. You're undisturbed for the most part.
And then looking forward for Nice Records, you've got some very, other than what we've covered in relation to Humble Pie, we've got some very tantalising projects on the horizon. You've got something else, Small Faces related, and also one of my favourites, Billy Nicholls. Can you tell me about those projects and anything else that you're planning?
Yeah, well, funny enough, the reason we're at Olympic, the reason we're at Olympic Studios today is to celebrate the 60th anniversary of Immediate. And a lot of the old staff, a lot of the old producers are coming here. Chris Kimsey, the Rolling Stones producer, has set up a new studio facility in what was the roof of Studio One. They've got a wonderful Dolby Atmos state-of-the-art cinema in Studio One. But higher up, because the room was so big, they've put a false floor in and set up a studio up there, which is also a live room can hold about 100 people. Wow. And it's just magnificent. So we're going to be up there at one point. But Billy's going to be here. A lot of the artists have donated equipment. Pete Townsend, Keith Richards, all the groups that are associated with Olympic. So going forward, that's going to be a great studio setup. And I'm hoping to bring back some of the old tapes that were originally done here so that Chris can work his magic on those. I know Billy wants to come back here, but the project with Billy Nicholls is basically to expand on that wonderful album. Every reissue that's come out has been a dub off an LP. No one's ever had the tape. We have the tape, we have all the multi-tracks. Billy has all his demos and works in progress. There's also unreleased material that never made the LP because you can only fit so much on an LP. It's basically the English Pet Sounds.
Yeah.
And if I can recreate with Billy a box set, would you believe the box set and also a definitive version? Because it was never fully mixed to stereo, it was mixed to a hybrid format. Primarily mono, but you could play it in both mono and stereo. It was never pure stereo. So Billy wants to do that. He's in charge of the project. If he's in charge, it's going to be great. If any artist is in charge, with a few exceptions, but if any artist, it's going to be great because it's their work. He's got demos, he did a region sound, he's got all sorts of stuff no one's ever heard.
I've got a very old extra CD of, is it called Snapshot or something of it? So this exceeds the demos that previously got out as well.
Oh, but yeah, I think Billy provided those demos for an expanded CD edition. There's been a few CDs that have come out that Billy's been involved in, which is great, but they've all dubbed from a vinyl copy of the LP.
Right.
So you've got a sound that's locked in as it was then. And of course, and then you get those copied and copied and copied. So now what we're going to do is it will be definitive because it has to be. Everyone is conscious of their age. They're not looking back in a sort of sad way. They want to leave a legacy. A lot of what we're going to be doing is to get this stuff recognized. It's not for old people. It's because a lot of this music is timeless, and it needs to be out there in the best possible format. Doesn't mean it's going to be madly lavished, huge, ultra expensive box sets. There'll always be an LP version. There'll be a box set version, but you're going to hear it maybe for the last time. These things are owned ultimately by major labels. We are licensing from them. The difference is that we have a lot of the tapes. Kenny has a lot of the tapes. I have a lot of the tapes. Certainly the artists have their own archives, their demos, the outtakes that the major labels don't have. So we've got this symbiotic relationship whereby we're driving what's coming out. Immediate Records under license. The two companies that we're dealing with, Charlie Records and BMG, it's a split copyright for Immediate through the territories after it was broken up when it was liquidated. We work closely with them. They do their thing, and we will do things with the artists that they're not doing. So, but I think ultimately everything will be streaming, but there will be this exclusive, I don't know if exclusive is the right word, but certainly a more boutique, bespoke feel that not only involves the artist, but involves the fans as well. There's going to be a much closer relationship because we need to reach the fans. We set up a website. I don't expect anyone to be out looking for a Humble Pie release. We've got to reach them. But we've had a great response from the press, like yourself, magazines running big articles on what we're doing. I think there's a market for it. I think the fan base of all ages want to hear this stuff. Certainly the feedback I'm getting is very encouraging. We've just got to get out there and reach people.
Maybe one of the final things it's worth stressing is just, in addition to the music, is, you mentioned Jared Mankiewicz earlier, but the attention to detail of the box sets with the artwork, the vinyl, the physical object. There is an incredible amount of effort to try and get the original negatives, as you were saying earlier, photos, sketches, anything that you come about in addition to the music into that set.
I'm very conscious that people were buying this thing as kids. They were growing up with this. They had the original adverts. It's hard to explain to someone the feeling of buying, I don't know, their Satanic Majesty's Request, the day it come out. All the build-up, that you have to translate into the reissue. And one of the ways you can do that, you're absolutely correct, is to find the photos, the session, that maybe they use one photo from for an enemy advert at the time, but there's a whole load of stuff that no one's seen before because there was only so much you could put on an LP, only so much you could put in a music paper. But these things are there. And then you get in touch with the journalists like Chris Welsh, who was there at the time, sitting in the studios, going on tour with the band. They can now, over time, put their perspective on things. So Chris is going to be doing the sleep notes for the Humble Pie box set because he was there. He had a perspective. Yeah, the detail, finding the original artwork. In Immediate's case, the whole thing was split up. Things were stolen. Things were lost. Things were put into archives. Over time, that's one of the things we've been doing. The Humble Pie sleeve, for as safe as yesterday is, we had some original negatives. Some of it we had to restore because it had been damaged over time. But you put them up against the reissues that have come out over the years, and it's just like night and day. We've reproduced the original in a lyric bag, but it's on thick card now with the shiny surface on the inside, so it doesn't damage the record. And so it's substantial. The sleeve is substantial, and you've got a 4-panel insert with the sleeve notes and all the technical details and all the credits of everybody who were on there. Great players like Lynn Dobson, who played the flute on the Autumn Stone. He's playing sitar and flute on this album, originally all uncredited, or maybe a tiny little credit in the corner. So we make sure everyone's on there. So it's as good as it could be.
And where can everybody go to? You mentioned a website.
Yeah, nicerecords.co.uk is the new website, and we've got some exclusives on there you can only get from the website. So for as safe as yesterday is, the version you can get in the shops and off Amazon is black vinyl and the CD, but there's an exclusive numbered gold vinyl edition on the website, which looks particular. And the gold vinyl actually looks like gold vinyl, because when you get these gold vinyl editions, it's like brown. But this one really sparkles, it's lovely. But all the versions are on there. For the small faces, the Autumn Sown, the signed copy, Kenny and Gerard have signed the box set. There's an exclusive print Gerard Mankiewicz did for us that they've signed. That you can only get off the website. There'll be a few more things like that. Few more things exclusive that we'll have on the website, so that'll be good fun.
Sounds absolutely fantastic, Rob. I really look forward to what's currently coming out, but as well as what's to come in future. If anyone is ever a fan of the material that's out on Immediate, and any music fan of certainly of my ilk, this is heaven. So thank you very much for your time, Rob.
Well, an absolute pleasure. And just to say, it is a pleasure to be working on this, not just for the artists, but for everyone that was involved in creating this, from the designers to the photographers to the engineers. A lot of people no longer with us.
Yeah.
So it is a sort of a tribute to them, so that new generations can discover it. They've got a chance of discovering it. So yeah, all the information will be on the Nice Records website. And there's lots more to come.